The nurse who remembered. The autumn sun filtered through the oak trees in Patterson Park, casting long shadows across the walking path. Marcus Hamilton stood perfectly still, his tailored navy suit looking out of place among the casual weekend crowd. In his arms, his 18-month-old daughter Emma gurgled softly, her tiny fingers wrapped around the silk of his tie. He had come to the park because his housekeeper insisted that Emma needed fresh air. Marcus had reluctantly agreed, though he felt awkward and exposed without his usual armor of boardrooms and business meetings. Since Catherine's death 2 years ago, everything had felt wrong. The world had lost its color, its meaning. He moved through his days like a man walking underwater, heavy and slow. Emma squirmed in his arms, reaching towards something. Marcus turned to see what had caught her attention. A woman sat alone on a nearby bench, feeding pigeons from a paper bag. She wore a simple cotton dress that had seen better days, and her brown hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail. There was something about her face, tired but kind, with lines around her eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. Emma made a sound, almost a word, and pointed more insistently. "Shoo, sweetheart," Marcus whispered, but Emma was determined. She twisted in his arms, leaning toward the stranger with surprising strength. The woman looked up. For a moment, she simply stared. Then recognition flooded her features, followed quickly by something that looked like pain. She stood slowly, as if unsure whether to approach or leave. Marcus found himself walking toward her before he quite knew what he was doing. Emma seemed to pull him forward like a tiny magnet. "Mr. Hamilton," the woman said softly. "I wasn't sure if you'd remember me." Marcus studied her face more carefully. There was something familiar in her eyes. In the gentle way she looked at Emma, the baby had stopped squirming now and was gazing at the woman with unusual calm. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, his voice rough from disuse in social situations. "I meet many people." "Avec oui. Sarah Bennett," she interrupted gently. "I used to be your wife's nurse." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He took a step back, nearly stumbling. "Sarah." "Yes, of course." She had been there during those final months. How had he forgotten? But he knew how. He had tried to forget everything about that terrible time, had built walls in his mind to keep the pain at bay. "Sarah," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were with Catherine at the end." Sarah nodded, her eyes already glistening with tears. "Every day for 6 months. She was one of the most remarkable women I've ever known." Emma reached out again, and this time Sarah stepped closer, letting the baby touch her hand. Emma smiled, a real smile, the kind Marcus rarely saw anymore. "May I?" Sarah asked, gesturing to a nearby bench. Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They sat together in the dappled sunlight, Emma between them. The park continued its lazy Sunday rhythm around them, children playing, dogs barking, the distant sound of a street musician's guitar. "I think about her often," Sarah said after a long silence. "About both of you. I left the hospital a year ago. I couldn't, it became too hard, watching families go through what you went through." Marcus cleared his throat. "What are you doing now?" "Odd jobs, mostly. Cleaning houses, waiting tables. Nothing that requires me to say goodbye to people I've grown to care about." She gave a small, sad smile. "I know that probably sounds weak." "No," Marcus said firmly. "It sounds human." They sat quietly for a while. Emma played with Marcus's tie, occasionally reaching out to touch Sarah's hand, as if checking to make sure she was still there. "She talked about Emma constantly," Sarah said eventually. Even at the very end, when it was hard for her to speak, she would whisper plans for her future. First birthdays, first days of school, graduations, weddings. She was determined to map out every milestone, as if by imagining them clearly enough, she could somehow be there. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He had refused to listen to most of Catherine's final words, had convinced himself it was too painful, that it was better to stay strong and silent. Now he wondered what he had missed. She left something, Sarah continued, reaching into her worn canvas bag. I've been carrying it around for months, hoping I might run into you. I looked up your office address, but I could never quite work up the courage to show up there. She pulled out a small, battered notebook. The cover was decorated with pressed flowers, sealed under clear tape. Catherine's handwriting sprawled across the front, for Emma. Marcus' hands shook as he took it. What is it? Letters, Sarah said softly. One for every birthday until Emma turns 18. Instructions for her first heartbreak, advice for choosing a college, recipes for her favorite foods. Catherine worked on it every day, right up until she couldn't hold a pen anymore. Then she dictated, and I wrote it down for her. A tear slid down Marcus's cheek before he could stop it. Then anote. Emma looked up at him with wide, concerned eyes, and he pulled her close, feeling Sarah's hand rest gently on his shoulder. She also left instructions for you, Sarah whispered. On the last page. She made me promise to find you and tell you something. Marcus couldn't speak. He simply waited. She said, tell him that love doesn't end when the heart stops beating. Tell him that Emma needs to see him smile again, needs to hear him laugh, needs to know that joy is still possible. Tell him that staying frozen in grief is not the same as staying faithful to memory. Tell him to live. The words broke something open inside Marcus, some dam he had built to hold back the flood. He wept silently, Emma in his arms, the stranger's hand still on his shoulder. When he finally looked up, he saw that Sarah was crying too. I'm sorry, he said. For not remembering you. For not thanking you. Catherine needed someone strong beside her, and you were there when I was too broken to be. You were there in all the ways that mattered, Sarah said firmly. Don't doubt that for a moment. They sat together until the sun began to set, painting the park in shades of amber and gold. Emma had fallen asleep against Marcus's chest, her breathing soft and steady. Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years, not happiness exactly, but perhaps the distant possibility of it. Like a light visible at the end of a very long tunnel. Would you? Marcus hesitated. Would you like to get coffee sometime? I think I'd like to hear more about those last months. The parts one was too afraid to see. Sarah smiled, a real smile this time. I'd like that very much. As Marcus drove home that evening, Emma still sleeping peacefully in her car seat, he held the notebook against his chest at every stoplight. The park disappeared behind him, but Sarah's words echoed in his mind. Asterisco, tell him to live. For the first time since Catherine's death, Marcus thought he might be ready to try.